Chapter 3.2, the Renaissance, Part 3. We're getting into the High Renaissance, beginning of the 16th century, so we're in the years 1500. And the Renaissance comes to kind of an abrupt halt, but we'll get into that in a minute. Three great Italian artists are Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael. They use perspective and illusionism. Patronage of the Catholic Church. Remember, it's important to depict how important the Catholic Church is at this point in time, and the influence of classical architecture. Okay, so we're going to look at Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, probably the most famous painting in the world. This is oil painting on wood. One of the things that Da Vinci is noted for is his sfumato technique, his smokiness. And what that is glazes, like those glazes I mentioned that were popular in Northern European, but we didn't have really very good examples in those two paintings that we looked at. Here we can really see it. So you can see how soft every edge is and like how foggy her hands look. The whole thing has been glazed and glazed and glazed. So he does multiple layers of like a tinted oil as opposed to a lot of pigment in that oil, making it into a true opaque paint. So glazes are translucent, almost like a clear coating, but it has a tint in it, just a tiny bit to kind of bring the tones down. And in this particular piece, it's very muddy, or in the case of the atmosphere, we're saying smoky. So sfumato means smoky. So we see our Mona Lisa here. We have our perspective, our atmospheric perspective going way back. Things get very faint and cloudy, and things are very distinct and clear in the foreground. Does that make sense? So we have that, but Da Vinci is also a scientist, so he gets into many other things. He has a lot of incomplete work, Da Vinci does, because I think it's hard for him to choose from his many talents. Okay, Michelangelo, he really excels at the top three, the painting, sculpture, and architecture. He did design the new St. Peter's Cathedral, and the Sistine Chapel is adjacent to this. It's a separate chapel, and he paints the ceiling here. He doesn't want to do this, but the Pope is asking him to do it, and he's kind of forced into it. And you'll see a depiction in the second segment, not on the ceiling, but on the wall with the Last Judgment. We'll get into that in a minute. So the Sistine Chapel ceiling, because he's such a three-dimensional sculptor, that's what his preference is, we see him add a lot of architecture that isn't actually there. So the real architecture are these pointed sort of arches here. Around the building, there's an archway here, and then it's pointed toward the middle. This... all of that's all paint. Can you believe it? So it's trompe l'oeil, means fool the eye. It looks realistic, but part of the reason he did this is to break up the scenes in the Bible so that they were distinctly framed as they would be like a painting. So we have Adam and Eve here, and we have the creation of Adam here, and so on. And then he's got some characters sort of adjacent to each one of these, sort of ushering it on. And that's very typical of his work. A lot of extra figures. These guys are sculptural figures. They look like little carved putti, what we call putti, or little. They're kind of like little angels, but little sort of children. They're also harken back to Cupid in our classical Greek mythology. But this is all just to make it look architectural and to break up the space, because it's kind of an overwhelming task. Also, with fresco, he's got a limited amount that he can do at one time before the paint dries. He's doing all of this on his back, up in the sky here, not sky, but ceiling, but he's up off the ground on his back painting this. What a miserable, miserable chore. For years he does this, okay? For 3 or 4 years he's painting this ceiling. That is all he's doing. He's really upset about it. But anyway, things look sculptural because that is his forte. Here's a detail, creation of Adam. Just stunning, stunning physicality with all of the musculature. So we're hearkening back to the Greco-Roman ideal of beauty. Look how buff Adam is. This is the first depiction of him looking in this incredibly muscular way. And even his females get pretty buff as well, because it's storied it is a mythology about Michelangelo that he drew them as men and sort of tacked on female features. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So he prefers his sculpting. Pope Julius II commissions this. You can't really say no to the Pope. And he has 9 central panels depicting the stories from the Old Testament. Later in life, this is almost 30 years later, he's asked back to do the Last Judgment. He's not happy to do this, and he's just not happy. He's toward the end of his life here, and he has a much darker sense of things, and he's feeling criticism, and he is a gay man, and at that time, that was not condoned by the church, and also could even be persecuted or killed for practicing or being caught out. So he does some things to sort of depict some of that. This is him. Let's see what our close-ups are. We're going to get him. So this is sort of a self-portrait of him in St. Bartholomew's skin, frustrated and sort of at the end of his tether here, that he's been commissioned to do this thing. He's very frustrated. He's tired of being judged in controversy with the church. But anyway, this is our Last Judgment. It's very active and it's very dynamic. There's a lot going on here. And this influences the late Renaissance, or what we call Mannerism. Mannerism comes into play. This painting in particular influences future artists, and we'll see that in a little bit. So the blessed and the damned souls face their last moments on earth. It's very chaotic and dark. And the uncertainty that's happening here is that the Reformation's happening, the split of the Catholic Church and the Protestants. So a lot of things going on here. He's reflecting that in the piece. So possible meanings: this tortured artist with this flayed skin. We're going back to that. He's so fed up, really. And then a reference to his homosexuality here. Another piece where he pokes fun. This particular person, he depicts him as Minos with donkey ears, because that's a portrait of someone who kept criticizing for all this nudity, especially male nudity, in his work and starting to get on his nerves. You don't make art in a vacuum. There's all kinds of people around you saying all kinds of things. And this is Michelangelo's chance to sort of get back at him. So even Michelangelo, Da Vinci, these people receive criticism. I know it's hard to believe, but Van Gogh, anybody you can think of, gets kind of fed up with certain aspects of their career, and this was his way of demonizing this individual. So this was Biagio di Cesena criticized his nudity. Okay, Raphael, absolutely epic piece, amazing too, when you think about this, 25 feet wide, 16 feet tall, fresco. Another master of fresco, another master and of the High Renaissance. So we really have our perspective down here, yeah? So if you look at all these lines going down, we're going somewhere behind these figures. But look at that perspective. That line is meeting that line, comes right down there, 1 point. So our vanishing point is what we're referring to with 1 point perspective. If there are 2 vanishing points, which there are here, this guy is drawn separately. 1 vanishing point going here and 1 vanishing point going here. Actually, I think it's a little more like that. So this is 2 point perspective. These guys are in 1 point perspective. He overlapped and layered with this painting, but all this stuff in the background literally is in the background of the fresco, and then he puts this guy in and a few of these other figures. I believe this one, but there's a diagram that you can look at online. So lots of architectural detail, lots of detail, period. What else do we want to say? Socrates. So this is the School of Athens. So we really are showing the history of classical Greece and here and how important it is. So Socrates is engaging youth in a debate, talking to Alexander the Great. So right here, that's an important historical figure. The Apollo, the god of music, lyric poetry right here. Made to look like Michelangelo's dying slave. Let's see what else we have. Athena, goddess of wisdom. So these are our Greek gods, right? So hearkening back to classical Greece. And then some poetic thinkers over here. Uh, let's see, ancient scientists. That's just sort of general. Euclid was an important mathematician back in Athens. So a lot of things that were important as harkening back. That's what our Renaissance is. It's the rebirth. Naissance, nascent has to do with, if you think of neonatal, it's a similar word. So it's a rebirth. So it's orderly, plays homage to Leonardo, which is interesting because he's depicted as Plato, and Michelangelo. So it's including some of the past. And then we're going to get into the late Renaissance and Mannerism.